Hi everyone, and welcome to Lesson 5, all about rhetorical devices. Now, rhetorical devices, we are going to get into the thick of what they are, but our objective is to be able to define and identify examples of 15 of them. Now, there are many more out there, but we're going to focus on 15 very famous rhetorical devices that we see frequently within rhetorical text and speeches. And we are going to try to become experts in these particular 15. Now, because this lesson is so terminology heavy, I am going to move through the material just a little bit differently, and I encourage you to pause frequently in order to update your notes and add little memory cues and little details as needed to help you try to remember the meaning of each of these and to distinguish them from each other. All right, now our driving question are what are rhetorical devices? And then what do they actually look like within a rhetorical text? Well, let's start with a little snippet of rhetorical text. You all should probably know this guy. This is former President Barack Obama. And here we're going to preview just a little excerpt from one of his most famous speeches. It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed a trail towards freedom through the darkest of nights. Yes, we can. It was sung by immigrants as they struck out from distant shores and pioneers who pushed westward against an unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can. Now, as you take a look at this particular excerpt, I want you to ask yourself, what intentional pattern or patterns do you see built into this speech? And then secondly, how do these patterns impact the audience or help the speaker achieve his purpose? Give yourself a second to pause and think on that. And then we're going to circle back around to this excerpt at the end of our lesson. All right, so let's get to the heart of what rhetorical devices are. Now let's kind of go back through some of the concepts that we've already learned and then build up to this definition. So what is rhetoric? Well, rhetoric is language designed to have a persuasive or an impressive effect on its audience. Now, we've also learned about rhetorical appeals. Rhetorical appeals are methods of persuasion that target the audience's mind, their emotions, or their sense of credibility. And then we have these things called rhetorical devices. Well, rhetorical devices are complementary to these other two concepts. They become yet another tool that serves our purpose of persuasion, but they come in the form of patterns of words or ideas that stir emotion and create emphasis. All right, now in these notes, we are going to review 15 famous rhetorical devices. I've shared with you that there are many more, but we're going to focus on these 15 iconic ones as they tend to repeat themselves quite frequently throughout our speeches. And so these will be the 15 that we're responsible for. Now, for the sake of clarity, I've organized each of these rhetorical devices into 3 different categories. The first category is figurative language. Here we're talking about words and phrases used in a non-literal way for particular effect. That often involves some sort of comparison between concrete and abstract ideas. We're familiar with figurative language probably from previous lessons in which we've studied poetry or fictional text. These are the same pieces of figurative language from these other genres, but they are simply now applied towards the purpose of persuasion. The second category that our rhetorical devices will fall into is repetition. Repetition are words and phrases that intentionally recur in order to create emphasis or unity, sometimes to create a rhythm or momentum. And lastly, we're going to find a whole little group of devices that are specifically geared towards creating contrast. Contrast are words or phrases that intentionally oppose or contradict one another. They're intentionally different and thereby actually kind of emphasize the unique qualities of each half. All right, now let's dive into our first section, which is figurative language. Our very first rhetorical device should feel familiar. That's metaphor. Metaphor is an implicit, implied, or hidden comparison between two things or objects that are poles apart from one another, but have some characteristics in common. Now, as I continue to move through our slides, you will notice my little Bitmoji down here that's going to share with you some little tips and tricks for understanding each of these devices and differentiating them from the others. I'm not going to read those out loud, but please feel free to pause and visit those little clues. All right, so our example of metaphor here comes from an excerpt of Patrick Henry's "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death," this famous speech that was intended to persuade the colonists to demand their independence from Great Britain during the time of the American Revolution. He said, "They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have been so long forging." Well, in fact, he is not talking about literal chains, right? He's talking about legislation. He's talking about overreach and control from the British government, but he is using these metaphors, bind, rivet, and chain, in order to evoke that feeling of enslavement, right? Which comes with it some very strong feelings and attitudes. Our next rhetorical device is analogy. Analogy is where we draw a comparison that shows a similarity between two unlike things for the purpose of explaining or clarification. Our example here comes from Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I've Been to the Mountaintop." He writes, "Now, what does all of this mean in this great period of history? It means that we've got to stay together. We've got to stay together and maintain unity. You know, whenever Pharaoh wanted to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, he had a favorite formula for doing it. What was that? He kept the slaves fighting amongst themselves. But whenever the slaves get together, something happens in Pharaoh's court, and he cannot hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves get together, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now let us maintain unity." Well, we know that Martin Luther King Jr. lived and spoke and worked during the time period of the Civil Rights Movement, in which African Americans were fighting for equal rights. Now, here he's drawing a comparison between the struggle for equal rights in the 1960s and the enslavement of the during ancient Egypt. Right? Now, two very seemingly different time periods, very different groups of people, and yet they are connected by this common message. Why is he sharing this story? What is he trying to communicate? He's communicating the importance of unity. Just as it was important that the slaves in ancient Egypt stuck together in order to get out of bondage, he is reminding African Americans that they must also maintain unity if they are to achieve their goal of equal rights, civil rights, human rights. All right, our next piece of figurative language is allusion. Allusion is a brief and indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea of historical, cultural, literal, or political significance. Now, that seems pretty broad and inclusive, right? But what we're talking about is something that's relatively well known, that's just sort of mentioned and dropped in to a speech specifically for the purpose of connecting ideas or connecting emotions through that very well-known reference. In this case, George W. Bush, in his 2000 inaugural address, makes an allusion to the biblical story of the Good Samaritan. He says, "And I can pledge our nation to a goal. When we see that wounded traveler on the road to Jericho, we will not pass to the other side. Now, he's not literally talking about a wounded traveler, right? Here, he's talking about the way in which our nation promises to take care of others, right? Our nation pledges itself to a goal that when we see others in need, we're not going to go to the other side as the other characters in this story did, but instead we will stop and we will provide assistance. Now, the thing that's really tricky about illusions is if your audience doesn't get the reference, if they don't know the reference, then it goes right over their head and all intentionality is lost, right? So this again really reinforces the importance of knowing your audience. If you are speaking to a room full of first graders and you are alluding to something from maybe American history that they're not going to learn till many, many, many years down the line, then they're not going to get the value. But maybe if you draw an allusion to, let's say, a Disney character, that might be something that lands upon them, that is well known to them, and therefore they're going to get the deeper connection. So really make sure that when these allusions are being used, that they are deeply connected to that intended audience. All right, and our last piece of figurative language is called litotes, kind of a silly little name here. And this is essentially an ironic understatement in which an affirmative is expressed by the negative of its contrary. That kind of bends your brain a little bit, right? Here's an example to clarify. New York is not an ordinary city, right? You can hear the negative here, right? It's not ordinary. What you're actually saying is something really positive. It's a really special place, right? But we're phrasing that in terms of almost a double negative. Or you could say $1 million is no small amount, right? Well, that's because it's a very large amount of money. We are saying something positive, but the words that we are using to express it are sort of naturally understated. All right, so I'm going to ask that you pick up with the second video in this series in order to take note of and gain some traction on our rhetorical devices that have to do with both patterns and contrast.